Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. I was reading a book recently, a book that's been on my bookshelves for many years, and to be honest, it's a while since I read it. And it's a book by Bertrand Russell called A History of Western Philosophy. And it details so many of the thought of philosophy down through the centuries. And I was reading the first few chapters that deal with the ancient Greeks. And there Russell talks about a philosopher called Empedocles. Now, Empedocles lived, he was born 500 years before Jesus, and although we call him a Greek philosopher, he was born in the city of Acragas in Sicily. Now, you might say, well, that makes him Italian, but back then Sicily was considered part of Greece. And anyway, Empedocles was a philosopher, and like philosophers at the time, he was into religion, he was into science, all kinds of stuff. And actually, he was a pretty smart guy. I mean, he understood that the world was a sphere, that the earth was round, and he understood that eclipses happened because the moon passed between the sun and the earth, and that the light of the moon was simply the light of the sun reflecting off the surface of a round moon. So actually he understood those things better than some people I still see on social media today. And he actually worked a lot of other things out. He was the one who worked out about centrifugal force, by that if you have a bucket of water and you hold it by the handle and you swing it round and round fast enough, even though the bucket's turning upside down, the water doesn't spill out, because centrifugal force basically creates like a mini gravity system to keep the water in the bucket. He was really paving the way for the theory of gravity and everything like that. So he really was a smart guy. Now he also speculated about religion, and he didn't always get it right, just like the ancient Greeks didn't. So, for example, the Greeks were arguing about whether the basic element that everything was made out of, was it earth, was it air, was it fire, was it water? But it was Empedocles that basically put them all together and said, well, there's 4 basic elements: earth, air, fire, and water, which actually the ancient Greeks, many of their greatest philosophers, continued to believe that based on what Empedocles had said. Now, he also worked miracles, or so people thought. We don't think they were actual miracles. Sometimes, he used his scientific knowledge to predict things that people wouldn't otherwise be able to predict, and that looked like he was working magic. At other times, it was probably just using sleight of hand, like a conjurer or a magician. But anyway, people began to worship him as a god. And he bought into this and began to say that he was eternal, he was immortal, that he was a god. And then people said, well, you know what, Empedocles, we know that when you die, we'll see your dead body, and then we'll know you're not a god. And he thought, I got to do something about that. So he got his followers to gather and follow him up to the top of Mount Etna, which was a live volcano. And he said, I'm going to show you that I'm a god. He said, you think that if you see my dead body, but you're never going to see my dead body, because if I can jump into the volcano and it doesn't kill me, then I'll be a god, won't I? And they said, well, yeah. He said, well, I'm going to jump in, but even if you don't see me, it's just because I've decided not to come back. And he jumped into the volcano. He actually jumped into a live volcano and obviously was killed. And he thought that would sort of cement his legacy, that he would always be known as a god, as being immortal. But unfortunately for him, the volcano, the force of the volcano and the updrafts, the currents and all, caught one of his sandals and tossed his sandal back up over the lip of the volcano, back at the feet of the people that were watching. And they basically said to themselves, you know what, if his sandal sort of got spat back like that, it's obvious he's not just gone off to some heavenly realm. He would have took his sandals with him, so he obviously wasn't immortal. And so that was basically the end of Empedocles. Somebody once wrote a poem about him that said, great Empedocles, that noble soul, jumped into Etna and was roasted whole. Now, why am I telling you about Empedocles? Because I've always thought about how that inconvenient detail of the sandal basically proved that all the stuff about being immortal was fake. That when it finally came down to it, the last bit of evidence said, no, he wasn't a god. And I contrast that with Jesus. When Jesus said that he was God, and Jesus encouraged us to believe in him and worship him and follow him. But the last bit of evidence for Jesus was not a sandal being spat out by a volcano. But the last evidence for Jesus, of course, was the resurrection of his body from the dead. So just as the last moments of Empedocles basically showed that what he was saying was false and untrue, he was either a liar or a lunatic. The last thing that we know about Jesus on this earth, he was raised back to life again and seen by many witnesses, tells us he is indeed the Lord our God. May you and I follow him faithfully today. God bless you today. Join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock, Drogheda.